Disneyland Park is the signature theme park at the Disneyland Paris Resort just outside of Paris, France. It's one of two theme parks at the resort, the other being Walt Disney Studios, which opened 10 years after this one, and the property remains the most visited theme park in Europe. The entire resort as a whole receives about 15 million visitors per year, which is huge and actually quite the contrast from when this park originally opened. When it made its debut, it underperformed. There was a net loss for that first year of operation. There was a lot of hesitation by the locals that weren't thrilled about a big American company making its way to France. But the properties in Florida and California had just become so successful, the Walt Disney Company wanted to bring that to Europe. Out of the different locations they looked at, including Spain and Great Britain, Paris was determined to be the best spot. They liked how easy of an access point it was for mainland Europe and had great access to flat ground. They were able to build up this entire resort, which is now home to 7 different hotels, their own downtown section called Disney Village, tons of shops and restaurants available there that don't even require an admission ticket, you just walk in. And as of now, the Disneyland Paris Resort is France's largest single site employer, 17,000 cast members. It's absolutely crazy. I've had the opportunity to visit this park 3 different times, once in 2022 and twice in 2023. I'm going to tell you all about my experiences, weigh the pros and the cons, as well as hopefully give some tips along the way. Now, before we even dive into the park, I gotta mention just how easy it is to access this property. You have a train station right in the heart of Disney Village. There's a direct line you can take about 40 minutes from the center of Paris, and about the same if you drove. And most people, when they come to visit, plan for more than one day. Because there's so much to do, including a whole nother theme park, I think it's fair to plan for 2 days here. Although certainly, their long operating hours absolutely help that if you only have one day and are just looking to do the essentials, it is doable. But if that is the case, definitely plan on spending more time here instead of Walt Disney Studios. It's actually really sad that they have to share a space together because that park is just not even close to being on the same caliber as this one. There's actually a full separate review of Walt Disney Studios on this channel. Go check it out. It's pretty much just one big roast. But luckily, this park is amazing. The second you walk up to the entrance, you have this amazing view of their signature hotel that acts as your front gate. And what I love about it is it hides the view of Sleeping Beauty's castle. So it's a true reveal that you don't get until you step foot onto Main Street. I've never stayed on property at Disneyland Paris, but man, this hotel is impressive looking. I can only imagine how cool it would be to stay there. But I've had the amazing opportunity of visiting a lot of Disney parks around the world, and I gotta say, in terms of just pure front gate experience, I think this is my favorite. It's just a beautiful first impression, no expenses were spared. Now, when you emerge from out under the hotel, you have a train station right in front of you, which this railway will take you all around the park, and when you come around that, boom, there's your reveal. Introducing the best Disney castle on the planet. And I will stand by that statement. It is so whimsical and fun. And Disney didn't have a choice but to make it that beautiful. When you're building a Disney park in Paris, listen, the locals here are used to these big impressive castles. Everything's so historic, literally hundreds, maybe thousands of years old. How do you compete with that? Well, you build something that is just so fundamentally different that it stands out. And the best part about this castle is you can walk in it. You can't exactly do that at Magic Kingdom. At Disneyland you can, they have a tiny little walkthrough, but this is just grand. There's tons of room inside to walk around, see all the details. And if you visit one of the small shops underneath, you might be surprised to find a secret passageway that leads to an animatronic dragon perched out underneath Sleeping Beauty's castle. Is that not just the coolest freaking thing ever? No other Disney park does this, and it is just incredible. Already, this park is getting huge brownie points with me. I think that right there is a prime example of how this park doesn't rely on just rides to entertain people. There's so much to see just walking around the park, exploring the different areas, finding the secret passageways. And it's a big park too. That's why I say if you're just here for like the big hits with like Pirates of the Caribbean, Space Mountain, you're gonna be missing out on a lot of hidden gems that really make this park work. But if you visited one of the other castle parks around the world, their main street is set up almost identically, but I do love how they still brought a fresh feel to it. These character designs and all the foliage and shrubbery is just beautiful. Such a slick way to represent all the different characters that Disney has in their archives. And you have the opportunity to see some of those characters, maybe as they're out walking around, taking part in a parade, doing meet and greets, etc., etc. It's very, very lively here. But let's peel away from the center hub and move off into the different lands around Disneyland Paris. And for here, I gotta start with the right-hand side, heading straight into Discoveryland. For me, this is the highlight of the park. This is a completely original land that essentially replaces the Tomorrowland that you have at the other Disney parks. Instead, they opted for a different vibe. Everything here is steampunk, very Jules Verne inspired. It's got an amazing color palette, the stylization is just so cool. It honestly reminded me of Rookburg at Phantasialand, or the Forbidden Island at Tokyo Disney Sea. Their Space Mountain is the centerpiece here, although it's technically Hyperspace Mountain. This is actually one of the expansions made to Disneyland Paris 3 years after the park opened. The addition of this ride really helped with an attendance boost in 1995. This is the most extreme version of Space Mountain that we have. It features an uphill launch in 3 different inversions. The downside with it is, it has a kind of cheap Star Wars overlay that just won't go away. To me, it just feels out of place, like shoehorned in there. They clearly had a great vibe going here. They knew what they wanted, and then they just tacked this in at the end. Although I do like the onboard audio of the Star Wars theme playing throughout the ride. That's cool. But that's not the only Star Wars attraction here. Just down the pathway is Star Tours. This here is almost identical to all of the other variations that we have at the other Disney parks, but certainly still a good time. Also in Discoveryland is Buzz Lightyear, the classic shooter family ride. No height requirement, anyone can do it. Also a little odd that it's in Discoveryland because it doesn't fit, but realistically I'm not sure where else they would have put it, so that one I'm not as mad about. But before you leave Discoveryland, one of the things I recommend checking out that's right near Space Mountain is the Nautilus walkthrough. Gives you the illusion that you're entering a submarine underwater. You can see the captain's quarters, where all the crewmates are living, and maybe you'll even spot a sea creature. It's about the closest we get to having an attraction based off of 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea, which is a brilliant ride at Tokyo Disney Sea. I wish we had something like that here. But let's move counterclockwise around the park, heading to the left-hand side for Fantasyland. And this is probably the most colorful area of the park, also home to some of the best views. So from here, the first attraction that you'll probably encounter is It's a Small World. It's very pretty, and yes, it has the same old repetitive song that you know and probably don't love, but it's in the other attractions around the land that Fantasyland really shines. So you have some classic dark rides such as Pinocchio, Peter Pan, Snow White. You definitely won't want to miss those, although beware of the lines because they are not the highest capacity attractions by any means. There's a lovely carousel, and right behind it, Alice's Curious Labyrinth. This is a must-do. It is completely unique to this park, and much like Alice, you too are about to get lost in Wonderland. This is a proper maze. They include dead ends, and points where you have to turn around to double back. But it's done so in a way that there's stuff to see as you're going along, and it's just so charming. The pinnacle of this is the Queen of Hearts Castle. You can go all the way up to the top, and you have this just beautiful view of the park out in front of you. I think you can make an argument for that being the best viewpoint in the entire park. You definitely won't want to miss that. When you finally find your way out of the labyrinth, right behind it you have another set of original attractions. There's a circus train, which is one of the 4 roller coasters here, but it's almost treated more as like a monorail and like a scenic tour in the same way that like Seuss Trolley is at Islands of Adventure. So is it a coaster? Is it not? I personally count it. There's moments of acceleration and slowdown, but it passes over top of a fairy tale boat ride, which takes you on a very cute scenic journey past all these little models from many different classic movies that you love. They're really well integrated. The models are just beautiful, so detailed. Another great family attraction that anyone can enjoy. Moving our way outside of Fantasyland, let's head into Adventureland. And this is kind of broken up into different sections. One of the first areas that you'll encounter is an entire Arabian pathway, which is of course loosely themed to Aladdin. It looks straight out of the streets of Marrakesh, Morocco. You won't find a ride there, but there is another little hidden walkthrough. This one again bringing back little models, this one depicting scenes from the movie. Some really great effects there and small animatronics, including a really impressive Pepper's Ghost effect with the genie. But that subsection of the land will eventually morph into an entire area that's themed after Pirates of the Caribbean. So of course you have the signature boat ride, which you can make an argument for being the best ride in the park. Personally, my favorite version of Pirates of the Caribbean. I haven't done the one in Shanghai though. But out front of it, we have Skull Rock. This is just one of the coolest areas in the entire resort. Tons of rock work, waterfalls, stalactites, stalagmites, bridges. Again, very easy to get lost in here. There's so many pathways. You can also look out and see the pirate galleon, just the beautiful Jolly Roger ship out on the lagoon. At one point in time, you could go on board, but since I've been going to Disneyland Paris, it's been closed, but still beautiful to look at. It's not something you can really find at the other US parks. And the final big ride back there is Indiana Jones and the Temple of Peril, which is the worst ride in the park. It's an Intamin coaster with some elaborate theming to one of the best IPs in my opinion. I love Indiana Jones. Everything I've described sounds impressive, but then you realize that the ride is more or less a wild mouse with some mild turns and an uncomfortable vertical loop. It's not a good ride. it is very rough and janky. This is a perfect example of a ride that had potential and could have been so well done, but instead is terrible. If I were in charge of Disneyland Paris, this would have been taken out a long time ago and replaced with a better Indiana Jones ride. And finally, to complete the loop, we have Frontierland. This is home to the iconic Big Thunder Mountain, which in my opinion is the best version of Big Thunder Mountain Railroad. It's located on an island, so there's literally a boat ride, the Thunder Mesa River Boat, which just takes you all around Big Thunder. You see it from all sides, and it is just so freaking cool. When you board your vehicle, you'll pass through an underground section so you can get up onto the island, go through all that elaborate theming on a really fun experience, and then you end with a crazy huge underground finale through a tunnel where you just keep on dropping and it goes on for way too long. It's amazing. If you get the opportunity to ride it at night, highly recommend. And then the other big winner here in Frontierland is Phantom Manor. So this is the Haunted Mansion, except it's in Frontierland. So they had to make some changes. The ride uses the same system, still a haunted, creepy vibe, but now it's more of a Western theme. So you got cowboy hats, saloons, horses. They even adapted some of the same scenes as the original Haunted Mansion, but just gave it a little bit of a twist. Really, really good ride. One of the best in the park. I'm not sure if I prefer it over the other versions of Haunted Mansion because I also really enjoy those, but just a great spin on a classic attraction. But that's your crash course of Disneyland Paris Park. Obviously, I know that I did not mention every single attraction. I tried to at least highlight the main ones. Last thing I'll get into before we start to close things down, the Nighttime Spectacular. This show is awesome. So you got projection mapping on the castle, fountains all around the castle, drones, sparklers on the castle, fog, lasers, and fireworks. It is like every special effect you can think of packed into one show and is just unbelievable. Now, when I visited Disneyland Paris, I got to see two different versions of this show. One was the 30th anniversary Un Monde Qui S'Illumine. That personally was my favorite. Really catchy song showing scenes from all the different Disney media, not just the classic cartoons. They also show like Pirates and Star Wars. I would take it over Happily Ever After at Magic Kingdom. But then in 2023, I saw a different version of the show, which to my understanding is a callback to an original show that used to be at Disneyland Paris that they brought back as like a special anniversary. The show was instead centered around Peter Pan, which is a different take. Definitely had a few pacing issues here and there, but I think that's why they have the other show instead. That one's a lot more modern. But just be prepared when you come here. If you want to see this show, it gets so congested. Everyone in the park is going to be shoulder to shoulder, crowded up around Main Street, so it might be worth getting there early. That gives you an idea of Disneyland Paris. In my opinion, this is the most beautiful Disney castle park. The quality is just so high and there's just so much to see and do. The biggest downside, in my opinion, is that they haven't gotten a new roller coaster since 1995. For reference, I didn't even exist yet. There has been so little change in Disneyland Paris because everything has been going to Walt Disney Studios, which is understandable. That park is a disaster. They need a lot of help. So like the Disney executives are probably looking at this park and they're like, well, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. But in my opinion, they're just long overdue for a new attraction. I know there were some rumors going around that they might be doing their version of Galaxy's Edge behind Discoveryland, which if that ends up being the case, that could be pretty cool, but we'll just have to wait and see. I highly recommend a visit here. I think it's such a fun time, some amazing theming, great vibes, and that's coming from someone who doesn't even resonate with any of like the classic Disney characters. I like a lot of the modern like live action stuff like Indiana Jones and Star Wars. I don't really give a crap about Mickey Mouse, but you don't need to. The park is so much more than that. That's why I would absolutely take it over Magic Kingdom, Tokyo Disneyland, probably not over Disneyland, but there are aspects that I like a lot better here than at the original Disneyland. If we could just create a hybrid of the two, I think that'd be great. But let me know down in the comments below if you've visited Disneyland Paris, what do you think of it? If you agree with my thoughts, if you think there's anything I left out that deserved to mention, be sure to post it down below. And stay tuned for more park reviews here at Coaster Studios, and I'll see you next time.